Welcome back to Highway Through Health. We're not a crisis line, we're not a therapy show, and we're not licensed healthcare providers. What we are is a place where lived experience is taken seriously because too many people have discovered the more clearly they speak, the worse they're treated. We share personal experience not to give medical advice, but so that when people encounter the kinds of situations we discuss, they're ready to recognize patterns and respond effectively. This show is about language, power, and what happens when systems stop listening and start translating people into problems. If you've ever felt misheard, mislabeled, or punished for staying coherent under pressure, you're in the right place. So I don't know. I was thinking, I don't really, something's been kind of going through my head. I don't know if I could run some of this past you or not, but I think,
Okay.
from the time the first experience happened, I'd say I'd spent the majority of the time from there to here being able to calmly and coherently explain, um, an experience with dramatic emotional intensity. So that's required a whole lot of compression of emotions as I go through and describe these things to people. And, I don't want that to detract away from, the spectacularness of the event, how liberating it is, things of that nature. But on the other hand, if you sound too excited and too thrilled about it, then all of a sudden, you get the that crazy
Yeah.
person stuff again. And so the endurance, I think a lot of people misunderstand it. And then when these things happen to us, they think, oh, it's just part of all this suffering because it's more of a social construct, people don't understand what it is we're going through. They don't
Right.
understand the kind of emotions that come in to help offset the torment
Yeah.
that gets thrown at you. But when I went through that experience, one of the things about the whole crucifixion of Christ was, I mean, this was very vivid part of it. And, my hands are like this, the crushing of that was and my feet are pretty much the same way. So there was a lot of pain in both of those, all up my arms, feet, legs, and I had a lot of stabbing pains as well.
Yeah.
We would describe that with the chest inflammation that goes on. And it was, that to feel rejection at that visceral level, I mean, it was every cell in my body being rejected. It's like my immune system was attacking every good
Yeah.
cell in my body, and I could feel it as I'm going on. And that shifted over when I died. It's like, now this is what happens because of the people who refuse to give up their freedom to lie. They're projecting that stuff back on other people. And it's that interplay of that keeps all this conflict going, the war stuff going, the injustice going. And it's the fact that we don't want to look real hard at what deception is and what it isn't, because, it was those nails being pounded into his arms because his hands would have ripped if he was supported by his
Right.
hands. You know, um, that was just get out of here. Why? Because when you're looking at that demonic energy, it really did have the desire. Its intention was to dupe somebody into killing their soul, basically
Yes.
cut themselves off. And what your post from earlier today got me thinking about all that. And it's the people don't understand why we really should spend a lot more time on this whole topic of deception, rejection of it, why we're so adamant about stop, crushing or trying to smash our civil rights, stigmatize us, pathologize us when we're trying to describe very real, extremely vivid events that were then backed up either by manifestations of some sort or things that, you really can't just explain away as some kind of a crazy hallucination because there's just so much common to that. So it's excuse me, it's another reason why I'm so instinctively anti-war because I don't see anybody doing this whole, hey, we need to get rid of deception as an operating system. for a government, for a community, or anywhere else for that matter. It's more the old, let's continue doing the same things we've been doing and expect something different to happen. And we know that doesn't happen either.
Yeah.
So, so for me, I just see it as just going around in circles, that kind of conflict, people just getting killed for no good reason, and
Yeah.
nobody learning the reasons about what we got to do to stop the whole thing. So, you know, because it has left us at a distinct disadvantage that in trying to advocate for this notion that we don't have to wait for our bodies to die to you get to experience this yourself. This is not me telling you people, this is not Dana telling people about it. This
Right.
is us telling you about the pathways as we best understood it that caused an event to happen, and that if you want to try it yourself, go find out the results. You're going to have to find it out for yourself. There's nobody else that can give you those results. And the fact that we've stigmatized the event itself, the pathways that lead you there, the expressions that you have afterwards, all kinds of notions, even about things like fanaticism or whatever. We've got it so goofed up. It's hard to say we see a way out of the whole thing. And yeah, it is frustrating. It's frustrating because we do have to do that, fight the stigma. And it's stigma that we should not have to be fighting. That's what's driving me nuts, I think, the most about what I deal with this topic.
Yeah, it comes to a very important thing. Something you had just touched on, like when you talk about like being anti-war, it really is anti-destruction. And we have
Yes.
a lot of people who are just, and when you think about war and the inanity of it anyway, all it is destruction, because at the end of it, then people have to sit down at a negotiation table and figure out how to clean up the mess. Well, why not just not have the mess to begin with and start with the negotiation table? It's so
Right.
senseless and so destructive, and so many lives needlessly lost, and so many innocent people that suffer, and so much just money and all wasted. And somehow I feel like there should be, because one thing I've often said, and this is really the truth, and it can be applicable to just about anything, except for maybe athletics. If your success depends upon somebody else's failure, you need to rethink your definition of success, because something
Right.
isn't right there. Um, and and I think that people need to maybe look at it from that framework and shift their mindset from, oh, I need to destroy you, to I want to build myself up. It's in the same framework of how people would study martial arts. When you look at Bruce
Right.
Lee, for example, yes, he went out and he fought and he made some great movies, but his whole thing was about being able to have the most mastery of his own energy, the mastery of his control of this. And people who study martial arts and look at the philosophy surrounding it, that's what it's about. It's about directing energy. That's how he was able to do such amazing things with just,
Hmm.
a flick of the wrist that could break boards. It's in how you are able to channel your energy, and that would include emotional energy. And my feeling is that there have been, and again, I wish people would look at the wastefulness and the wanton destruction from the drug for structure. It is fraud, it is eugenics. That
Yep.
Jeffrey Epstein was very heavily involved with discussing his trafficking operation, and how to hide what he was doing, and how to have control,
Hmm.
unearned control over people. So he was involved with a lot of these elites, not just of Wall Street, but of these universities who were all these, psych frauds and all this. He was very
Yeah.
heavily involved with them. And I think that's maybe something that people also need to take a look at when they're looking at where is this criminality and just how evil are these people, how much they really want to be able to have a false narrative and hide the most grotesque, brutalizing torture and trafficking that there is out there, how long it's been going on. And when you look at who's involved, when people think of Epstein, they see that pure evil. Well, they should look at who he
Mm-hmm.
was talking to, who he was working with to try and do this eugenics and this depopulation agenda, because it simply is that.
Right.
And that it's being controlled by the ones pulling the purse strings, the WEF. It's a literal son of a Nazi who is doing all this, who has laid a framework and a groundwork, not just in the United States, but worldwide and globally. That's how we ended up with the pandemic. And I would hope that people would want to take a look at the larger picture, because yes, we tell our personal stories, but from a vantage point of how we are progressing, how spirituality is threaded within this, that we don't want to be persecuted for our spiritual beliefs, for getting better. They have been very, very fucking hateful of us. How dare we get better?
Mm-hmm.
How dare we say we don't want them in our lives? How dare we say we don't want their drugs and their control and our autonomy stripped from us and our rights stripped from us? Well, they
Right.
shouldn't have that to begin with. If they're truly wanting to do
Yeah.
what it is they keep claiming they want to do, which is make people better and give them a better life, then they should just get the fuck out of it when they're asked. There shouldn't even be a question about this. They shouldn't be
Yeah.
perjuring themselves in courts of law. It's just absolutely unsensible as well as unconscionable what they've been doing, and the fraud is really very blatant.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have this young woman who's on trial now for having murdered her children, and
Yeah.
paralyzing herself, and we see this far too often. We saw it with the young man who shot up everybody in Sandy Hook. He was on just a
Oh,
multiple,
yeah.
just drug after drug after drug. And I said, and I think we've both been saying for a while, it's not the guns, it's what these people who have then been so drugged up beyond any comprehension that they don't even understand to some degree what it is they're doing. It's not that that's their natural
Right.
state. It's the drugs that are forcing the brain damage. It's the drugs that are forcing that disconnect. There may be other factors involved. Yeah, he was into first person shooter games and a lot. We've kind of talked
Mm-hmm.
about this too. And we have a culture that unfortunately supports and promotes that isolation for monetary purposes.
Yeah.
For a number of other, it really is a lot about money. Having kids be distracted and not taught how to think. They end up being sort of brainwashed into what to think as opposed to how
Mm-hmm.
to think. Um, Not jobs being available, so there isn't really incentive uh, for a lot of things. And then, of course, the pandemic had people further isolated and
Oh, yeah.
further removed from what we had known growing up. It really does. And a lot of these things do have to come into it because it's all these false narratives that have swooped in and pushed these toxic drugs. These are poisons.
Mm-hmm.
And having children take speed that's one molecule away from meth, and having the audacity to call that medicine, I'm just sickened by that. I really am. And this is how
Yeah.
we get to where we are. This is how we get from a point where the San Ysidro McDonald's incident was so enormous and so frightening when it happened because mass shootings
Mm-hmm.
weren't commonplace. And then we had Luby's, which I remember very vividly, and it really made me kind of afraid. Every time I walked into a restaurant after that, I was always checking the exits and all because
Oh, yeah.
it was just so horrific. And we've only had that become so much worse that now we have Columbines happening in far greater numbers. The drugs contributed to that
Mm-hmm.
as well, as did the false narratives. And it's got to stop. It really absolutely must be looked at for the failure, for the poverty profiteering, for the trauma profiteering, for just for the lies and just the blood money that it actually is. When people go back and they read
Yeah.
the Zyprexa papers or the story of Johnson and Johnson, and they see just the amount of fraud, the amount of trying to hide things that they knew
Hmm.
were destructive, they knew caused just an outsized amount of suicides, let alone homicides. They've known this for a fact for years prior to even putting it on the market, but they did it anyway and then
Right.
spent untold amounts of money trying to hide it and then to put new versions of the
Hmm.
same old poisons out there. And those were all based out of chemical concoctions coming out of the Holocaust, besides. And it's time that people take a look at these facts. It's time that this stuff is being discussed and people not signing non-disclosure agreements for really a pittance. I think a lot of people are
Right.
unaware who have unfortunately felt the sting of the trauma and tragedy that these drugs have caused and created. I don't think they realize when they go into court, when it's a win, that they're going to have to keep their mouth shut. Um,
Right.
and this is how, again, part and parcel of how we got to where we are, and why I just flat out refuse to take part in any sort of lawsuit. I'm glad that I've made inquiries into it. I'm grateful that there have been lawyers and firms who have listened to me. Um, but I'm also glad that I stood up for myself and said, listen, there's no way in hell I'd ever sign an NDA. This Cherokee broad's not keeping her mouth shut.
Right.
I've already seen enough genocide of my own people. I've already seen enough genocide uh, with the Holocaust, and now I see a rise in anti-Semitism. I'm tired of this. This is really nothing more than a uh, a re-implementation of the Third Reich via
Yeah.
corrupt corporations and via big pharma. And it's the same players, by the way. It's some of the same manufacturers, some of the same
It's,
industry heads. It's no different.
yeah. The big wheels turning all again, and the same things keep. It's this. I mean, the pattern gets to be so obvious, and especially if you can. I think. Well, for me, it became extremely obvious when you cross over to the other side, and then you see this interplay of stuff. And at the time, I had lupus, so I'm thinking maybe the Civil War kind of ancestor had something to do with it. But we were all on the northern side, and so that really wasn't it. But when that happened, man, it was like, okay, here's the conflict map, and it's like turning little gears, and it went from Fort Sumter to Gettysburg down to Shoreman's March, and it's like, these people, when and for what was being done in the South, deserved every torch that was put to it. It was just a wipe that crap out. That was the kind of mentality. That was the destructiveness of this pro, I would say, the pro deception crowd, right? The people that want to keep using it, keep it moving around in our lives and never debate it, never talk about what it really, really does. Because then when you get into the demonic side of it and you see these people on the stand and what this woman is going through, and you know what they're trying to do to her, you know what those messages are saying, Jerry Marzinski has talked about those. He's got a huge list on his website that anybody can go take a look at. I've heard some of them phrases repeated in that courtroom. And here her psychiatrist was telehealth, and personal contact doesn't matter. Here we go again, right? So, um, man, you just say this is inevitable. It's going to happen again and again because we've yanked morality out of the equation. We've yanked a whole bunch of very real anchors out of what causes conflict. Where does conflict come from? It's not some errant brain chemical. That's not its representation here. It's done out in a lot more
Yeah.
serious ways than that. And choice is a massive, massive part of it all. So, when I felt like this, when you were mentioning Bruce Lee, yeah, I mean, the whole martial arts thing, that's a I'm not a victim thing, isn't it? No matter what, no matter what situation he found himself in, he's not going to be backing off or backing down. And I'm sure he spoke in the same manner, right? Because that's very
Yes.
liberating for people. And these are the same kind of liberating emotions that we're talking about bringing into your consciousness and start using. You're not a victim. You don't have a problem fighting back. There's life on the other side. This isn't the end. What's attacking you, why they're attacking you. You know why they're trying to shut you up. They want to, why stigma is there, why it's trying to make you feel bad because it doesn't want you to feel happy. And we try and devise all these ways to not let those people like you and I express those kinds of emotions that go along with that liberated feeling because it scares the crap out of people. I mean, if it scares them because they want to extinguish what they see in us because they don't believe it's possible. It's oh, that's got to be come from your illness, or you've been too much and you just had an emotional breakdown, or they have in their head what happened, but mm, my experience um, trumps what's going through their heads. So I'm hoping that we're making some kind of progress in explaining some of this so we can get through some of this dialogue and stop the kind of stigma that's going on this topic because this interface is a big deal. It's very real. I've noticed a lot of commonality with a lot of people who describe their spiritual experiences, especially when it comes to the topic of deception. Then we're pretty much aware of what it means to be unaware of things. That's not a new topic. That's dead in sin in the Bible. That goes way back, right? So we've been talking about that a long time. Lack of discernment, low discernment practices, and how low discernment practices in America have really become part of the standard of one of the reasons why we get so much stigma thrown at us because when people say faith and belief turns into look at all this silly stuff I've never weighed out or done what the Bible really tells me to is discern what's going on, put things through the fire. don't don't just accept something on face value. Test it, test those spirits and see which ones survive and which ones collapse because you can and very well are until you're completely reunified with the Holy Spirit. You're self-deceptive about something, and you're going to have a hard time finding it. And it is
Well,
tricky to go find.
and here's part of it too. The people that want to deny things because they know they are being deceptive. Those who are in charge of this whole fraud know they're being deceptive. They know they're lying and they know we're telling the truth. And that's part of what
Mhm.
they're afraid of as well. And like I say, in my case, I had QHHT misused on me. And people do know that past life regression hypnotherapy actually works. It actually helps to either reverse, alleviate, or cure things if the person is wanting that and working towards it, as I already was. So for them to have deliberately misused that, and again, you have these elites that already know about it, but they want to keep that secret for themselves and push these eugenics on everyone else. So that really is a piece of the puzzle too that I feel is very important for folks to know,
Mhm.
that they already know, and Rockefeller already knew that what other people were doing, what's now considered alternative medicine, but what should more rightfully be considered ancient medicine, what more
Yeah.
rightfully should be considered traditional medicine. He knew that worked,
Mhm.
but he wanted to push petrochemicals down everyone's throats, and he wanted to profiteer off people's pain, trauma, and basically commodify every person in the US and then worldwide via industrialists. Other industrialists found this
Mhm.
idea attractive too. But that really is what the core of this is. And again, I feel like that definitely bears wider discussion. The connection between the spiritual and the scientific. There was already a dude working at Harvard that I tried to get in touch with that my messages mysteriously disappeared, but I knew that people had been,
Mhm.
uh hacked. The one phone is very hacked, and I knew that. All the traffickers were very involved. Again, the
Right.
person that sold me, as well as my ex minder, uh, were computer experts. So obviously they knew their way around doing things. Me being very
Mhm.
stupid and naive, I mean, I barely knew how to turn on this laptop when I first got it. I couldn't figure out that the on switch was a button you push. I'm looking for, on the side and off and on
Yeah.
switch like an old computer. I'm just not at all
Right.
tech savvy. I am very, very much rooted in, if my grandmother didn't use it, I probably don't use it either. I'm still that way.
Hmm.
But I try to be as understand as much as I can. It's hard for somebody who's autistic and gets overwhelmed and then bogged into details anyway. Um,
Right.
I
Hmm.
make no bones about the fact I have a lot of challenges, but the thing of it is, when I work within my parameters, when I work within my own framework, and this is very true of anybody who is autistic at any level of neurodivergence, we have particular gifts and talents. And
Yes.
we should not be punished for not acting like the norm, because what the hell is the norm anyway? And why do you want to get rid of people who have something special? What's
Right.
the deal with that? Why are you trying to make everything plain vanilla? It's not. It's mind boggling to me that they want to absolutely destroy anything that is unique, that is human, that is spiritual, and that really is too much of what I've been seeing. And again, I feel like it's monetary. There are certain churches that have had this whole desire for control over people as opposed to letting them develop spiritually. They want to be a middleman
Yeah.
between people and God and pretend like they have
Hmm.
all the answers instead of telling people you have to search for that within. That's why there's a Holy Trinity. That's why there's the
Right.
Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is present within each one of us, and each of us has the potential to become as Jesus was. That was part of Jesus's message. And that
Yep.
seems to have really gotten lost due to a lot of these prosperity preachers and just a lot of other folks who didn't have actually helping people save their souls uh,
Right.
and reclaim their autonomy and their power and their relationship to something greater than themselves, not via
Hmm.
dogma, but via experiential ways, just via spiritual ways, things that the Kabbalah teaches, things that other
Right.
ancient religions teach. It's a lot of people who had a more of a monetary bent uh, after Jesus was around that wanted to turn that into a religion as opposed to an experience. They wanted to put their own false narrative surrounding that, and now we're seeing that with science as well.
Hmm.
You have people that want to try to obfuscate facts, obfuscate truth, and put a false narrative out there to their benefit.
Yeah. I think some of it gets to the idea that a baby's a blank slate when really a baby is a product of 5 generations, right? If we look back at the
Mhm.
Bible and it says go back that far when you're looking at once you start getting mired into problems. And that gets passed along and passed along and passed along. So a lot of that programming is in that DNA. Now that soul has to push back against all that stuff. We don't look at it like there's a soul in there that's got a challenge in front of it. We say, oh, all your anxiety has to do with your childhood. Well, no, it doesn't. And what that by that notion alone there kind of compresses everything. And what you were saying about the past life regression, yeah, if you're not reaching back and going, what's this 5 generation roll up all about? How
Right,
much pressure does that put into my consciousness today? And how do I have to unwind from that? That kind of starts to give people a little bit more of an idea of the magnitude of the emotions that you're pushing back with that eventually lead to one of those breakthrough experiences. So, there's so much about the way psych has framed up people's lives and expectations. And I can imagine that woman with the 3 kids, and she's feeling the pressure of society, all this stuff going wrong. Where's the spiritual side of it? I haven't heard any of that, and I don't want to make judgment calls about that, but it clearly had no bearing whatsoever in the mind of her psychiatrist. So, I know a person who's in that level of suffering and torment. What are they going to get? Somebody who's going to apply a model that I never, ever want applied to my medical
same.
issues ever again. Keep that crap away from me. I don't
Yes.
want to hear about it. So, but that's the standard. That's what they get. And I don't I'm not holding against her, just like Andrea Yates. I think that was the one, the really when the chemical imbalance thing started taking off and everything was, um, I believe it was in the 1990s. I should look that one up though. But
I
you
think you're correct. A lot we heard about Susan Smith, Andrea Yates. It was a few different
know,
women there, and that's when they really
mm,
started to push and promote the since very debunked complete fraud of chemical imbalance.
yeah.
But that's when you really started to see pedal to the metal with that.
And I think that's probably when we started seeing the negative output of psychs, from starting in the 70s, concluding with the MK Ultra, how they went into behavioral control, behavioral modification, manipulations. Don't treat things like fear and shame as, they're basically they're frequencies, right? I mean, do you provide them either wittingly or unwittingly places to stick onto, or do you
Right.
have a practice that naturally repulses those kinds of forces? And all that's really important. All that to me, I have to use that kind of language to talk about how I push back against my health issues. I'm not, blind about I may be going blind, but I'm
I
not
get
blind
it.
about
Yes.
what I'm faced with every day. I don't imagine that I'm, a lot healthier than I am. I do like to keep active. I do like to challenge myself. I like to get up and say, okay, just because I have all this going on, that's really the defiance coming out. And that's what really is a big part of it is I'm not going to let it beat me. And it just so happens that psych gave me I guess I don't want to. I've called them an enemy in the past. I would like to put that behind us, but again, we're not the ones that started it. We're not the ones that started the threats. We're not the ones that hauled
Yeah.
people into courts. We're not the ones that refused to stop when we repeatedly said no.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
where does that leave everybody?
Yeah, and this is why I feel like our discussions are very important because we are building the alternatives. We are actually looking at this like, okay, we went through this literal hell. I
Mhm.
had to deal with actual torture, trafficking, human experimentation, things that I wouldn't have ever imagined still existed. And in the 20 and
Yeah.
21st century, but now we're seeing it in a very heavy way. Uh, but I had to, and I've kind of understood things more in increments, and really taking the benefit from the past life regression hypnotherapy. And I have no doubt that I had probably told the gentleman who did it, and I could see that he really hated having to participate in
Hmm.
giving that information to the wrong people. I could see it. But I knew he'd been threatened because one of the things he said to me is, I have kids. And I understood
Wow.
that
Yeah.
and I know that when people push back, they get threatened. And I think that he probably stuck up for me. I think he's been part of the whistleblowers.
Mm.
So God bless him. I'm not going to mention his name because I wouldn't want to put that out there. People know who he is, and I'm sure if he sees this, he knows who he is, and I'd
Right.
say thank you. Um, so I wouldn't doubt that I said, let me walk all the way through this because I knew when I was, having to report all the fraud, malfeasance, tenant harassment, all the stuff I was going through with the seizures and all this was we were attempting to move from one place to another, the old apartment and all. Again, me not
Hmm.
not fully comprehending that it was more than just abuse, that ex was a minder. I had already wanted to leave him at that point. I didn't realize how much worse or how much was at stake or anything else. But you don't know what you don't know until you know it. But
Yeah.
I realized too, as the more I kind of was getting away, that it happened in layers and in increments. And the interesting thing, the gentleman I was just speaking about, who said turned out to be the hypnotherapist, um, one of the things he said to me was it's like layers of an onion, just about things in general. And that's
Mm.
very true. And when I look now, when I have this greater understanding, and the more I started to read the books that were, Dolores Cannon and Michael Newton and a lot of the other folks, Brian Weiss, who have talked about past life regression hypnotherapy, and having been somebody who had my whole life really had studied comparative religion, but certainly for like 40 years at least, was very heavily into that.
Mm.
And didn't ever find myself committed to any particular dogma or
Right.
religion per se, but just knowing that Jesus was real, knowing that God was real, and trying to figure out how may I have the best relationship with that presence, because I didn't want to put God in a box. I knew we were made in God's image, but it always seemed to me that these so-called religious leaders were trying to make God in man's image, and it bothered me.
Mm.
And the fact that women weren't well represented really bothered me.
Yep.
And as a woman, obviously that really bothered me too. So I felt like the more I was starting to understand, of course, the more they were pissed off that I was understanding this, but I had
Mm.
understood that, I was already, even with having the seizures and all, I was coming to a point where I was not only understanding this, I knew who the people were that were involved in my past life and what roles they had and what they were. And it was like, I can't believe I'm understanding all this stuff. What in the high holy hell is going on? Only to
Right.
find out that two of the people involved with this, their dads went to school together. I thought, how much more bizarre is this going to get exactly? And I wasn't, it was just like mind blowing to me. But
Right.
I, I I had wished that somebody would have removed me from that situation to allow me to kind of piece and puzzle this out together. But clearly, they had another agenda going on to frame
Mm.
me as crazy because, God forbid, their whole drug infrastructure and their lies and their fraudulence falls apart. I didn't realize my identity had already been thoroughly stolen. Didn't
Right.
realize all of this other fraud had been happening around me, and that they were trying to frame me in some particular way to really either to have me shot or to try and put me away permanently. I didn't understand. I know that
Mm.
now, but now I'm glad that I can expose it, because again, it's not just me, it's a lot of other people, and it really has needed to be stopped. But knowing that my past life that I had cut out early and committed suicide, that's part of the things that I had to overcome. And I knew
Right.
that. And it made sense then why, as I was, nobody, they were purposely not giving me an out. They really wanted to be able to keep collecting on those fraudulent life insurance policies. This was because every time, they were getting ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching every time they
Oh,
fraudulently,
sure.
perjurously put me into a hospital and kept force drugging me. That was all money, 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 and gravy on their part. Um, so, so again, each time I died and they declared me dead and then kept experimenting on me, that was more money in the bank for them. And it's really very sickening just how far these people will go. But the one time where I did go out of my way to take pills, he had beat the shit out of me. Nobody wanted to acknowledge that. But it was weird that I had, at that point in the hospital, somebody handed me this very strange iPad. I was somehow able to, somehow my stuff was on there, it didn't belong to me. Uh, you know, uh, and the weird thing is too, at that point, because I had other thing in my head that but again, they progress you, they can do this. So I knew that people had
Oh.
financial incentive to make me look crazy and to not actually help me kind of really comprehend what was going on. But one of the weird things that happened was, and this was right, it was in February. There was snow on the ground. It was right around Valentine's Day. I couldn't stand to be with that
Mm.
minder any longer. Like I say, he beat the shit out of me. I, tried to OD because I just, nobody was helping me leave. I wanted to go. I went, me and my
Yeah.
cat, I wanted to go. Um, and I went to look for a Simpsons. They had me in the neurology department, and that was the time where those two doctors from Canada, I have no doubt from McGill, being in collusion with that other, you know, butcher from Hopkins. Um, And I went to watch a Simpsons episode, and instead of there being a Simpsons episode on, there was a repeat of a rain delay of a baseball game. I can't even tell you how confusing that was. And I'm sitting here telling you, and to this day,
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't believe that instead of the Simpsons episode that was supposed to be on, not just would it be a repeat of a baseball game in February, but a rain delay of a baseball game in February. And
Yeah.
I have
And
not ever seen anything so bizarre as that ever since. I've
right.
never forgotten it. And I'm like, really, in the middle of all this weirdness, this? Um, but sure enough, and then the next Valentine's Day was when Mr. X Minder had thrown me to the ground, started kicking me, calling me a cunt, and in bust the head of that so called treatment team with 10 cops in riot gear. And they dragged me. I'm just watching Eddie Cochran videos, and this will come up again if I ever tell this whole entire story. That part of it is important, and it will come up again.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there doing that when he just all of a sudden just throws me down, starts kicking me. So this was obviously already pre-planned, and it
Yeah.
had to be on Valentine's Day, And they dragged me out of there. 10 cops in riot gear roughly shoved me in the back of a car and take me away while he's holding a knife, kicking me and calling me a cunt. Now it makes no sense. Why is that treatment team head coming in and doing all this? It's not even sensible.
Right.
Um,
No, it's probably pre-planned and
it was
then
definitely
just
pre-planned. And
it,
now I know what part of that had to do with, and it had to do with the whole psychic driving, and it had to do with a whole lot of other things.
mhm.
Um, and and there were other times they were trying to put me up, and then he was always trying to have me go to this some place owned by Shepard Pratt Fiction Factory. They're frauds. They need to
Mhm.
be shut down ASAP. I was sexually assaulted in there. So have many other people been.
Jeez.
It's horrible. They really they get corporate funding from Toyota, from Rand Corporation. It's bizarre. Anyway,
Hmm.
yeah, very very heavily involved with
Well,
still the corporate MK Ultra funding and the
but
militarized.
it
You know,
kind of sounds like what they were doing. I mean, when you get hypnotized, there's false memories they can implant. So you trying to sort through and discern what all these things really are. And at the
yes,
same time, they yank away all the anchors, the social anchors that might help you start to recover and start to put the
right,
pieces back together. Like it's almost like they were trying to keep you in a state of confusion and not let you get your
you
feet
know,
back on the ground and not let you process what these different people, what their roles were and how they're
yeah,
repetitive today. And, this and kind of like a same thing, different day
yes,
pattern
that's it.
repetition, and you have to go through that and look at it, and you can be wrong during that time. That's why if they sit around and call this stuff psychosis or you're being delusional, you're actually getting rid of some delusions that but you have to sort those delusions out.
Mhm,
Although, I mean, a
mhm.
lot of so-called normal people are
Right,
walking around with some pretty massive delusions, and we don't sit around and pathologize those people. We just have a way of doing that for people that are going through spiritual experiences. And so as these things are pulling apart, I remember like, well, that's not right. This one, that doesn't fit. And so then you have then the vacuum has to get filled in. What was that? If it wasn't this, it had to have been something else. What was that? Yeah, that's a lot of very real, very soul searching, deep, deep look things that you're going through. And it's very liberating to go through that because your what your free soul feels like once you've had the opportunity to cross over and you don't have that victim stuff hanging on you. You don't have that fear, that shame stuff going through your head. None of that's there. The pain's not there. The suffering's not there. The injustice is not there. All the garbage that we, come back over here and you take a look at, that's choice. We're
right,
choosing that. So
right.
it's not, we're not on this massive, well, how do we make humanity better, this kind of philosophical garbage that we've been fed since we were kids. It's like, no, we're perpetuating patterns because we refuse to renounce our freedom to lie. It gets really simple.
Yeah,
But I think still a lot of those people you're talking about when you're bringing up the evangelicals and those, and none of those people, none of those churches would sit around and talk about what is that pathway back to having that reunification experience that you don't have to wait for your body to die. That's the thing that that we're just saying that most of those people aren't.
yeah,
And I don't think that's being unhinged in any way, shape, or form when you talk about all the discernment that goes along with it and what we stress with that. Functional behavior, the just improves your life in many, many ways. So I guess I'm still feeling like, we got a ways to go on the dialogue side. We just have to keep going, and I'm gonna keep trying to do this as flat line as I possibly can. But these are, I think, when you really get into these conversations, they can be extremely emotional, and people can
right.
really, really get into, what they have to confront as, they know they're double-minded in a certain way, and they think, man, I've got this. I can't break this obligation because it'll hurt these obligations. And no, you have to break it no matter what.
Yeah,
This is the point
yeah,
where you say, no, that if I hang on to that, it's going to kill me because that's really what it does. Because I can promise you that when I pass through the other side, if you're trying to push deception into that, it ain't going to go. And
right.
if you want that to be part of what you are, you're not going to go. So you either let it go and get rid of it and find all that
Mhm.
relief and that, or you're going to keep hanging on to it and it's going to keep eating at you and you're going to have those conflicting emotions and and I can just see what that woman was going through at that time. And man, there's nobody around today in a church or a psych group that I can think of or I've run into that would approach that situation in the kind of ways that you and I are talking about. Kind of a deconfliction away from those horrible, searing emotions. There's a whole lot there. And when people don't even think that's possible, how can you even get that point across to them? And the problem too is it doesn't take 5 minutes to get into a state of crisis, and it doesn't necessarily, there's not a 5 minute exit in a lot of cases. It's a lot of, I got to do this, I got to do that, a lot of one foot in front of the other, develop a program, work a program, get comfortable with a program. It can be a very long process.
Yeah.
So, helping people out in those kind of crises, helping take care of the kids, helping reassure them that things are going to be fine. If we get this, really wish we could get these immersive experiences back on a full-time basis so we don't have to talk about them on an if basis. But I do understand, the ramifications of that too. It would be huge. It would be really
Yeah.
big because then people have to have the conversations that we're having that they don't want to have.
Well, right,
And
and a couple things about that too. One, they what we were talking about in my situation, they were purposely trying to keep my nervous system in a state of
it
heightenedness.
sounds like
They were
it.
intentionally doing that.
Mhm.
And that is exactly what scammers do, by the way. So they're
Right.
using the same kind of playbook that scammers and frauds and all these other folks are doing. And as I've watched certain things about different abusers, traffickers, manipulators, all of this, they are using the same exact thing, but they're trying to cloak it as help. Some fucking help.
Right.
That they're no more than contributing to scam, fraud, waste, abuse, trafficking, and literal torture. And they need to be
Right.
ashamed of themselves. They were doing literal human experimentation on me to their own ends.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to allow them to continue to get away with attempting to say it was help when they stole my identity, stole my credit cards, misdirected my mail, all manner of things. They're just horrific. These people
Oh
are
yeah.
terrible. And by the way, I mean, it kind of sounds like Bob Lazar had some of the same shit happening to him around the disclosure aspect of him with the UFO stuff. So that's an
I would
interesting.
not be surprised at all. A lot of
Yeah,
funny stuff happens to you when that stuff happens.
yeah. So just as a little aside to that too. Anyway, I was going to say something else about that. But anyway, what you're looking at, that kind of scamming, trafficking behavior that again goes hand in hand with Epstein. People should look at the fact that he colluded with these folks in different universities, the top psychiatric folks, and they're actually
Right.
doing that. They're promoting and behaving in that kind of way. They're really out to destroy people's lives. It needs to be looked at. Oh, and I feel like if we are able to bring people like the conversations that you and I are having, if we are able to start having these discussions with other people who have had spiritual experiences and able to put that into a positive way so that when people are indeed having spiritual awareness, spiritual awakenings, that it's not being fraudulently mislabeled, that people aren't literally being tortured,
Right.
and held down and forced drug with poisons and deliberately mischaracterized, because these people are doing Darvo. They are the ones who are creating and causing the destruction. They're the ones who are holding people hostage. And yet somehow they're
Yeah.
saying that if you don't take our poisons, you'll go out and hurt people. And it's like, no, your poisons are actually making people hurt others and kill themselves. This needs to stop. This 1984 doublespeak has got to stop. I'm tired of
It does.
it.
It does.
It is a fraud, and it's a huge fraud. And again, I'm sorry that it's gotten this far, but I am very grateful it's now coming to the surface to be confronted. I don't ever want another trauma or tragedy. If not for
No.
these drugs and the lies surrounding them, we would still have Phil and Bryn Hartman here. We would still have Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle would still be here. We would
Yeah.
these children that have passed Sandy Hook massacre wouldn't have happened. There's an awful lot of things that need to be looked at through the lens of this whole forced drugging, these eugenics drugs. These are neurotoxic poisons, and it's fraud.
Hmm.
The whole structure surrounding it is nothing more than fraud, and it's to
And
avoid dealing with
eugenics
real
ideology
problems.
that's built into the whole thing.
That's
You know,
it.
that's the delivery mechanism
It
for the whole
is.
thing too, is eugenics. And it's not,
Yes.
it's not neutral,
Yes.
it's anti-spiritualist. You know,
Yeah.
they'll call
And
you
I think,
hyper religious, but they don't. Go
yeah.
ahead.
And it's they really are trying to push against the disability community. So they're trying to find these
Hmm.
loopholes and things and roll back protection. It's not okay. None of this is okay. It's eugenics
No.
based. It's not all right. And I don't like ever be. I have a lot of health challenges, which were made far worse by both the neurotoxic poisoning as well as the TBI from the forced electrocution under perjurious fraud. I was
Yeah.
already dealing with brain damage from the seizures. I didn't need it from electrocution that I didn't want. I made that clear too. Very, very
Yeah.
obvious violation of my civil rights, human rights, and violation of the Nuremberg Code there.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm glad I had the receipts for that. But like I say, I feel like my experiences, I frame it in a way that God allowed me to keep going in order to expose this and to
Right.
build something better, because the spirituality and the reality of God, of Source, by any name, needs to be acknowledged, respected, protected, and we need to be allowed as people to build up communities and societies that support and celebrate that support and
Yes.
celebrate healing, that support
Hmm.
and celebrate things like, again, being neurodivergent anyway, my autism allows me to have certain things, maybe in some ways, a particular kind of resilience, or I'm not sure what you'd want to call it. But like after losing on 100.7, which they went off the air yesterday, so I'm bereft of Hebrew in the
Bummer.
morning. I realized I really cried. I'll cry. I know I'm going to be in tears tomorrow morning, realizing there's no more blast off. And through that, he would read out names of all the different people who would text in. So it was a
Hmm.
real community, and it was a community for years. And 100.7, the classic rock format, had been around for years, and Huber's been on the air, I think, for close to 20, doing morning show.
Wow.
But when I was going through a lot of the worst of what I was going through, that was one thing that I would tell myself, okay, I can hang on until 6 in the morning when I hear Huber. I can
Hmm.
hang on and do that. And to have that now is it's just a big missing part of my life. It's a missing part of a lot of people's lives. A community comes together around music. And of all
Yeah.
things, it was sold to a so-called religious station. So I left a message and I said, listen, I've had way more spiritual experiences and come to Jesus moments listening to Rush than I ever would with if any
Yeah.
preachy crap, and it's the truth.
Yeah.
Because that's very philosophical music. It's very in depth, and it gives people from all disparate backgrounds and a chance to come together and be a community of Rush fans and discuss the lyrics and how they've touched our lives and things like that. And it's very difficult that they've taken
Hmm.
away something that was part of certainly my daily routine, part of a lot of people's routines. And like N-Dub's wife is going to have their first child in October, so we don't get to hear all the stories and different things. It
Yeah.
brought people together in a very real and tangible way, and that loss is very deeply felt. And now I have to kind of rearrange my mornings after so many years to do something that's not, because even prior to that, I listened to the radio in the morning, but
Hmm.
Earbird really become my go-to. And I'll miss
Wow.
having that community with so many other listeners. That was my last link to Baltimore, really. Um, outside of
I
the
hope they'll get another job and you can hear them on another station over the
I'm,
internet or something.
I'm hoping to talk Sirius XM into having them on as a morning program, because there isn't really that mix anymore at a lot of local radio stations. They've been eaten up by corporate conglomerates. We've seen
Yeah.
this happen everywhere. But to have that mix of like music and comedy, and they had regular skits like your Daily Dose of Dumb, and
Hmm.
the Wheel of Torture, as they called it, where they had to eat like really weird food and stuff like that. So it was like, and Lust, Mary, Kill, and all these other kinds of like
Hmm.
different stuff. But where listener participated, but they had just such a good chemistry and a good mix of like music, and they tell stories around them listening to music and their favorite band.
Right.
And we don't really have that anymore. So I'm hoping that maybe Sirius XM would like to pick them up and maybe have a channel that's sort of dedicated to kind of maybe having
Yeah.
different little regional folks doing this kind of thing, and to pick
Hmm.
that up and take it to a national and international audience. I would appreciate it. I know they would, but it's something that I don't want to see disappear from the cultural landscape. I really don't, in a more general way, but certainly specifically with those guys. It's a really good group of people over there.
Yeah. Yeah. That is too bad. I hope they can get something pulled back together and I don't know what I guess if they did their own thing, they'd have to deal with whatever's involved with copyright and whatnot, paying
Yeah, they
people
do
to
a
play music.
podcast. Yeah, they do a little podcast called Hanging with Huber. So I'm really hoping that, like I say, I'm definitely going to bring it to Sirius XM's attention.
Good
Um,
idea.
and I hope that a lot of people will go ahead and subscribe and support those guys. It's a really good group of people, and I know a lot of people in Baltimore would love to be able to see them continue. And
Hmm.
like I say, I think they would definitely play to a national and international audience. It's just a great mix of chemistry and
Yeah,
just very very real, you know very involving, and I think people would appreciate that. It's a good
absolutely.
it's a good little it's a brain break. You get to celebrate some of the good things in life, and not
Right.
weighed down in all the heaviness, and that's always deeply appreciated. I think
It
people
is. I
sometimes
mean,
don't realize that value.
it's it's you got to have fun, or this is a
You
real
do.
painful experience, right? So
Yeah.
I do the same thing, find some things to do that I really like doing, and I keep doing those things, and I have no intention of stopping that. So you
Same
know,
here. Yeah. I
keeps
get
me
back into
going.
writing. Yeah, I get back into writing. And I know that it can be really difficult for me sometimes. I'm finding words. Like I said, since the TBI, I'm missing chunks of my Lord of the Rings knowledge,
Hmm.
chunks of like my old, album knowledge and songs, and I used to know track listings and all. And so much of that is gone. But I take a lot of heart from Gord Downey, and I feel like part of my story is, and I really pray every day, God, please allow that horrific so-called research that was done on me to help prevent or reverse glioblastoma, and allow my recovery to help people who, and I really feel like
Yeah.
that's part of my life story and part of my connection, because both Neil Peart from Rush and Gord Downey from Tragically Hip passed from glioblastoma.
Wow.
And I have gotten a lot of inspiration from Gord Downey's story, and and the Tragically Hip fan community, and their music means a lot to me. Obviously, Rush does too. They've been a part of my life for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, so that's how I frame that experience. I allow that to give me another perspective. I allow that to allow me to help heal, and how part of how I rebuild every day. Because
Right.
that's, yes, I went through something really terrible, but but I pray that God will inspire what I've been through, and that I can do that myself, that healing is possible. Am I going to be back to where no, nothing's going to take away the facts of what happened to me. So I'm going to
Right.
take away the damage. I have significantly more heart problems and nerve damage than I did too. Sometimes my legs
Hmm.
go completely numb out of nowhere. And while that used to be a constant and very painful before, it happens now, and it happens, and it is very painful and it's frustrating. But I thank Jesus it's not constant anymore, but
Right.
I still deal with it. Um,
Yeah.
it is what it is, but it's not, it's something I can accept. But what happened to me because of other people's cruelty and brutality is unacceptable, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of very coherent people in there who I didn't have a problem having conversations with, that they were
Yeah.
they weren't doing the uh, well, it's my roommate when I first got into to Pine Rest, the first person that was in there, that they said to me, you got to tell them what they want to hear, you're never getting out of here. I thought, no, they'll listen. No, he was absolutely right. If you don't
Yeah.
go along with the, oh, I had this problem, this is what it was, and your drugs made me better, thank you so much, and and just lie to them, they just keep pecking away at you. But I
Mhm.
was in there a lot longer because I refused to do that. I was, no, leave me alone. I'm suing you. And especially after the court shenanigans took place, there was no way I was going to accept that under any circumstances.
Mhm.
So, I'm that's just an outrage beyond outrages. And to me, this is something that has to be pushed back against to my last breath, because it's completely unacceptable. It has no place in medicine. This speculative garbage that, and then to follow on, you throw a label on somebody that allows them to be kidnapped at any time for any reason,
Yes.
anywhere. And
Yes.
the kind of conversations we've had, if we had it with a psych person sitting there, at some point we'll say something that will make them nervous. That's not our problem. They
Right.
don't like it. And they try to make the fact that they don't like it our problem. There's the projection thing again, and
Yeah.
it's just never ending with these people. And so just shut up and get out of our lives. And if we
Yeah.
don't want you in them, then we don't want you in them.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. It's like how
seriously.
funny, after I got away, after all I was doing was begging for a safe place to be where I could re-regulate my nervous system and go about my life. And now it's been like
Mm,
2+ years. Yeah, I've had to lose everything I ever owned, including my
yeah.
identity in my life a few different times.
Hmm.
But yeah, hey, wow, surprise, surprise. I've had nothing to do with any kind of rent a friend bullshit therapy, and they sure as shit haven't been somebody fraudulently shoving me into a psychiatric hospitalization
Right.
incarceration and forcing me onto poisons or electrocuting me. But gee, I'm living my life and paying my bills and doing what I need to do and being the
Yeah.
responsible citizen I've always been and kind of going back and starting to enjoy things in spite of all the challenges that have been laid before me. Well, and I'm glad they finally quit fucking stalking me because I tried to get a protective order taken out on them. And you should be able to do that just like
You
any other
should.
fucking stalker.
Yeah.
Hell
You
out of
should.
here. Particularly when they've been doing known fraud, abuse, stealing your property, getting life insurance out, cashing fraudulent life insurance policies, getting credit cards in your name. Well, goddamn, somebody should be protected from
Hmm.
that. Shit.
Yeah.
That make a
Yeah.
damn sense. Otherwise, everybody is just then going along with that kind of trafficking, fraud, known criminality, and that shit needs to stop. Gotta stop.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't want any part and parcel of it when I saw that they were trying to, when I went through school for medical coding, and they wanted me to sign off on fraud. And I said, no, what's my integrity? I'm not doing that.
Right.
So,
Hmm.
so that's when I started to see a lot of this shit was a big joke. I just didn't realize how bad this was. I had no clue. None. You
I
know,
didn't either.
and people knew I have integrity and that I'm honest. And if I, because I've not ever hurt another person intentionally ever in my life, I couldn't do it. And I definitely didn't take anything
Hmm.
that doesn't belong to me. I've not ever been a person like that. Um,
Right.
I'm as honest as the day is long with all that stuff. I mean, yeah, I had my own trauma. I had things that I had difficulty dealing with. But I didn't like talking about it, and that doesn't mean I wasn't trying to get on with my life. It doesn't mean, and these folks never want to even fucking acknowledge trauma because they're causing
Mm-mm.
it. But they don't ever want to admit that that's part
Right.
of the problem. They put all this phony baloney, chemical imbalance, which they know is a lie. And I've been tired of hearing it. I said, just let me have my goddamn life back. Would you
Yeah.
please look at everything I've already lived through? But again, too, Hopkins was part and parcel of that abuse and fraud and research as well.
Yeah.
I it is what it is, and I just want to be able to move on in a healthy way. And thank you, Jesus, been able to do it
Mm.
for two
Yeah.
years. And that's because they're not all up in my business. They're not all up in my girl trying to make up shit about me. I'm so tired of that. I've
Right.
had a very tough life. Let me at least live the rest of it out without being hassled, harassed, and having all these false narratives and being literally tortured, poisoned, electrocuted.
Yeah.
God damn, just knock it off. Keep away from me. I tried my best. If you can't live a good, clean, decent, honest life and be a decent, law abiding citizen, you got to sit there and do fraud and destroy other human beings to make a living. No. That's
Yeah.
You're doing wrong and you know you're doing wrong and you're the one that needs to have a come to Jesus moment. I've had several, but y'all trying to perpetrate this crap need to be doing that.
Yeah, they
So,
definitely do. They are certainly unaware of how toxic that they are. That was the big time takeaway that I took for my 21 days. And I don't know how many names, individual names are on. I started to put them all down on a list, and I got to 40 or 50 of them, and I was done. This is just crazy. This make work project that we're forced to fund that just doesn't even understand the
yeah.
meaning of the word no because they're so drunk on their own power and their own, ideology and their own, grandiosity that they
Well,
project on everybody else.
and supporting
So,
corporate welfare. They don't want to admit that a lot of the problem is poverty. They don't want to admit they're causing a
yeah.
lot of the poverty. So they're really working
Mhm.
for these corrupt corporations that have been sending jobs away that don't support allowing people their own independence and their own autonomy to earn their own money to not be reliant upon this whole fraudulent charity structure or what have you. It's nonsense
It
because the
is.
jobs
It
were
really is.
there, and now we have AI, replacing a lot of jobs too. So all of these things are problems that they want to avoid discussing are the real issues. And they
Right.
really are trying to just do now cover up for all these other corrupt corporations and industries and all this. And again, it needs to be looked at from that perspective. It's a much larger system failure. It's a much larger rot that's been happening for far too long that they've wanted to place a particular phony baloney and blame the victim on, and it's far past time it stops. We the people
I
are getting
agree.
tired of it. We the people have solutions, and we the people deserve to be heard for the solutions that we do come with because they're practical and sensible and not relying upon a lot of fraud and lies.
And stressed mothers deserve a whole lot more than the psych industry that they're getting today. And that's really all they have to turn to,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah.
Well, with that, we have hit our limit. We've gone over, but we don't
Oh
care.
wow.
I always enjoy talking to you, Dana. It's always a lot of fun.
Wow.
But
Same here, hon. Same
all
here.
right. Well, I'll get this one wrapped up and we'll meet
All
again
right.
next week. I'll be talking to you in between too, I'm sure. So
Yeah,
take care.
yep. I'm going to send you a picture of the little planter thing outside. I want to see. I got to get your opinion
Awesome.
on that. So,
Cool. Looking forward to it. Take
all
care,
righty,
dear.
hon.
See you soon. See you next
You
week.
too, hon. God bless.
Okay.
Enjoy the
You
weekend.
too. Bye bye.
Bye.